There are definitely things about Missionary Impossible that I liked. It's not my favourite episode of The Simpsons, but it definitely wasn't too bad. And we have a pretty great voice cast as well, or a supporting voice cast, which I'll talk about in a moment. This is the 15th episode of the 11th season of The Simpsons. It's directed by Stephen Dean Moore. IMDb has a total rating of 7.3 out of 10, which for this point in The Simpsons is not too bad. And this focuses on Homer pledging, I think, $10,000 to PBS. And of course, Homer doesn't have $10,000 to give to PBS. And there's this wonderful scene. I won't spoil too much about this, but quite early on, there's a wonderful scene where a bunch of PBS characters and personalities charge through the streets, kind of like a lynch mob going after Homer. Various characters, including the Teletubbies, which I just thought was fantastic. And I grew up with the Teletubbies, was obsessed with them. Seeing them on The Simpsons was something that I thought was very effective and rather delightful. The PBS pledge drive is actually hosted by Betty White, who voices the character of Betty White in this episode, and I thought that was pretty awesome as well, and definitely something that made this a little bit special. Now, in order to escape this PBS mob, Homer ends up claiming sanctuary in the church, and Reverend Lovejoy ends up sending him away to become a missionary. And obviously, Homer doesn't really know anything about Christianity. He doesn't know that much about the church or its teachings. So when he goes to this location, he spends time getting to know the locals, and we have a great mix of kind of personalities. There's a character he calls Lisa Jr. because she's a little bit like Lisa, and I kind of like that contrast. I thought that worked quite well. But what Homer does is basically corrupt this society and cause all kinds of chaos and basically introduce them to the deadly sins, quite frankly. And it's funny and it's entertaining as long as you don't take it too seriously. I don't know if kind of having this negative look at a missionary is going to offend anybody. I'd hope not, because I think it's clearly saying Homer is not the type of person to become a missionary. This is not what you'd expect if you're a missionary. I think it's very clear. But at the same time, there are certain things. I feel like people can just be very sensitive to a lot of things, which, I mean, it's fine. You don't have to watch the episode, but it's just something to bear in mind. But personally, doesn't bother me at all. I found it to be quite entertaining. There's a line about Fox in the episode that I thought was pretty effective. Very funny, very entertaining, wonderfully animated. Loved the involvement of the Teletubbies and Betty White, of course. I have to say, it's a strong episode. It's probably the strongest in a while. Not entirely sure how far back I'd have to go to find an episode I liked as much as this one, but Missionary Impossible I thought was pretty good, and definitely the strongest in a good while.